Welcome, children of God. This is Pastor Paul Steinberg, and you found the Christ for Disciplers podcast, where every weekday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we take 10 minutes to disciple ourselves so we can better disciple our children. So we apply God's Word in a way that especially looks at, well, how can we pass this on? This week we're looking at Saul becoming king from 1 Samuel chapter 9. Let me ask you, how tall are you? Not just are you 6 foot, are you 4 foot, are you 5.5 feet, but does that make you feel tall? Do you feel tall? Do you feel short? For me, I think like I'm average. I'm 5'10", and I'm average until I actually sit down on a plane. I actually have really short legs, so when I'm on a plane and I sit down, my head's actually taller than most people's. One time I flew in a plane with a good friend of mine who was really like 6'4", maybe. Definitely taller than me, Bruce Becker. And on the plane, he always gets the exit rows because he wants extra leg room. And so he said, well, got that seat for me as well. You got to pay a little bit extra. And we go in there, and then when I'm used to him being taller than me. When we sat down, we actually were like the same height. Or if anything, I was a little bit taller than he was because I have a long torso. Does that make you feel any different if you feel tall or short? Today we're going to look at how God chose Saul to be the first king, and people would have noticed something about him. That he was handsome and he was tall. And that was something God picked. And I wonder if you think that's a good thing or if you think that's a bad thing. Well, we'll get in the story that Saul's the king that the people wanted, and he was everything they thought they wanted in a king, but he didn't turn out so good. He started out good, and then he kind of lost it. But then they're going to get King David, who, when the Lord picks him, he says, the Lord doesn't look at the things on the outside. He looks at the heart. And David's just this young little boy, so he picks him. But yet we find out David was also called ruddy and handsome. We're not exactly sure why God chose that the first king of the nation of Israel would be a good-looking, extra tall, hey, you look like a king sort of guy. But it was what he chose. And Saul had everything set to be a good king. He just chose not to be it. So as you think about how tall you are and what your gifts are and how tall your kids are, I want you to think about this extra tall Benjamite named Saul. This is 1 Samuel chapter 9, beginning at verse 1. There was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeor, the son of Bachareth, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel, and he was a head taller than anyone else. So this guy really stands out. He's from this long line. He's from the line of Benjamin. Again, Israelites would know their family line. But man, this guy, you'd have looked at him and thought, man, he's got something. I don't know if his eyes stood out, if he had a good, extra strong build. He certainly was tall. A head taller is a lot taller. 6 inches at least. And when we think of this guy, Saul, don't think of him being like 6'8". Got to remember that 2,000 years ago in the land of Israel, people weren't as tall as NBA players. They probably, were a lot shorter. A lot of people estimate maybe Jesus was only 4 foot something, an average Jewish height. So maybe he's just 6 foot tall, but he would have really stood out. You could find him anywhere. He looked like a great military leader. Would just have a little bit of charisma. We think about Saul ready to be king and how that would have been something that would have given him an advantage. That when people think about a first king, well, when they see him, I think he should be a king. Maybe you've thought that way when it comes to leaders or presidents. That guy just looks presidential, is a thought you might have. He just looks like he's going to be right, and you're judging someone by their outward looks. Now, we say we don't do that, and we train our kids to think not try to judge people on the way they look, but we do, and people do, and it makes a difference. Your height and the way you look and the way you come across, or the way your eyes can capture people's attention, that just makes a difference. It does. There's power in that. I mean, I think about some of my teachers growing up, and not that they were good looking, but they sure had a way to express stuff on their face. I mean, they could do a lot of disciplining without ever saying anything, just by looking, right? By just making that eye contact, and maybe as a parent, you can give that stink eye. You can do different things. The way you look makes a difference. It really shouldn't, but there's power in that, and God distributes gifts differently. Now, if you are a little bit extra tall, or you have a little bit extra certain gifts, sometimes it's something that you let people see and you brag about it, and sometimes you hide it. Like my boys have a good friend who's really tall, but he kind of always slouches because he just doesn't want people to notice how tall he is all the time. And I don't think that's unusual. If you're really good at music, some people don't want you to know that they're really good at music. They kind of keep their gifts hidden. A gift you have if you supervise kids, you coach kids, you teach kids, you have kids, is you get to spend enough time with them that often you get to discover their hidden gifts. You kind of find out what they're really about, and then you can encourage in the right way. There are some people you got to pull back and say, hey, you're overestimating what you can do. You got to slow down a little bit. But often lots of kids, and I think especially a lot of Christian kids, they get this humility sometimes, but then they don't want to stand out. Or maybe they're afraid of being laughed at or not doing things with excellence. I think in a social media age, people are so used to seeing people do things perfectly, right? They see the video of the take that went well. They hear the recording that went well. They hear the one in a million person that they think that they're not all that awesome. But you can encourage them and let them know, man, the gifts that God gave you, including if it's of good looks, that you just have a charisma about you, that's a very powerful tool that you want to use for the right reason. Good looks can be used in God's kingdom. We get that. Our God used Esther, used other individuals, and he still uses people that have that charisma about them. Now, Jesus, according to Isaiah 53, there was nothing about his appearance that, I guess, drew us to him. Maybe you've noticed that in movies, when Jesus is there, there's some way that you kind of know who he is. That maybe they give this Jewish guy these bright eyes, or they put a little fuzz or haze around him. But by Isaiah's prophecy, and by all accounts, he was a normal Jewish-looking guy, that he just would have been normal. Was extraordinary was what he said and what he did. But we know that Jesus perfectly utilized every gift that he was given. But we don't assume he was good at everything, like he was a perfect athlete and he was a perfect student and he did it all perfectly, but that he had some strengths and some weaknesses as far as his abilities, just like everybody else. Like maybe memorization was hard for him, but he perfectly worked in those restraints. So we don't know. That perfection is what God looks at. That perfect effort and striving is what God sees, instead of us, how we've not always used our gifts. But any combination can be used in God's kingdom. Thanks for taking 600 seconds so Christ doesn't take second in your life or the life of your kids. God's blessings.